The story begins with young Ju, a beautiful office worker, and her boyfriend, Yi-yoon, who's serving in the military. Anxious about his girlfriend on the outside, he calls whenever he can to check in. Meanwhile, young Ju constantly has to listen to her colleagues and mother gossip about her boyfriend. They all tell her she shouldn't wait for him, a man who's uncertain about his future and doesn't dare make promises. She, on the other hand, is unsure about where they're headed. Finally, due to a misunderstanding that isn't clearly resolved, young Ju suggests a temporary breakup, even though they both still love each other very much. Young Ju is looking back at memories of the two of them when her senior colleague, Seo, calls. He's coming into the city on business and offers to pick her up for dinner. Young Ju doesn't want to go right now, but since he's already at her doorstep, she can't really refuse. After all, he's helped her with work, so she sees this meal as a way to repay him. Yi-yoon calls several times, but she's sulking and doesn't answer. After a while, though, she goes to the restroom to listen to his voicemail. Last night, he put himself in her shoes and realized he'd been too selfish and unfair to her, to them both, so he's decided to let go. Young Ju hurriedly calls him back, but his phone is dead. Not wanting things to end like this, she wants to go to the military base to see him. Senior colleague Seo, upon hearing this, offers to drive her. At that time, Yi-yoon and his teammate, In-ho, are assigned to get gasoline at an intersection near their base. They're on top of a 77-story building whose private elevator is broken, forcing them to take the stairs. The two of them go into the hotel floor. As expected, they were blocked by the Asian European front desk staff for going back and forth in this area, which would upset VIP guests. On the way, senior colleague Seo makes a move on young Ju. He says that no matter what happens, he'll always be there for her and wait for her. Young Ju understands but just nods in response, sidestepping his advance. Just then, because he's not paying attention to the road ahead, senior colleague Seo hits a pedestrian. Young Ju is shocked by the scene in front of her, feeling something hot and sticky on her neck, and she becomes even more panicked. On Yi-yoon's side, everyone is stunned to see a plane heading straight towards them. Everyone freezes in place, waiting for the disaster to strike, but the plane swerves at the last minute and crashes into a busy street below. This is an emergency situation. Yi-yoon intends to return to the base, but In-ho says they must complete their mission first, so the two of them rush to the elevator to get down quickly. Young Ju tremblingly removes what's stuck to her neck. Oh my god, it's an eyeball. She turns to senior colleague Seo for help, but he pushes her hand away. Suddenly, the injured person moves. Young Ju tries to ask him for help, but he's even more scared than she is, so she takes matters into her own hands. First, she puts the eyeball back in place for the person. Stay here, don't let anyone take it. Then, she turns to passersby for help, but they just stand around filming and pointing. Young Ju has to specifically call out one person before a woman steps forward. Alex is about to refuse, but people insist, so he reluctantly helps. Senior colleague Gu sees someone standing on his car and yells, telling Alex to get off. Young Ju tells Alex to ignore him and focus on saving the person first. Yi-yoon and the other guy were trying to secretly use the customer elevator when they were unfortunately caught by the manager, Aaron. They were moving smoothly when a sudden incident occurred. Manager Aaron called security. After a few minutes, the elevator returned to normal. They continued downwards, but when they reached the 53rd floor and the doors opened, the man suddenly began to bleed like rain, and the others covered their heads while running and yelling. Just as the elevator was about to close, a bloody hand reached in, shocking the three. Before them was a man with half of his face covered in blood. It looks like he was attacked by a dog, so they did not dare to approach him, and then he fell and was crushed by the elevator. The three decided to get out of there to see what was happening, only to see people falling from the floors like flies, and tragic screams echoed everywhere. In-ho was walking when he suddenly slipped and fell. Looking back, he saw that he had tripped over someone's intestine. "That's mine, ma'am." A man with only half his body and one arm was desperately reaching towards them. While the two were wondering what this thing was, a piercing, "Oh my god," came from manager Aaron. The victim had been brought down, but the ambulance hadn't arrived yet. While waiting, Alex wanted to perform CPR on him. Young Ju quickly stopped him. "Jesus, take it easy, old-timer." "No, you have to press hard to do it right." He vigorously pressed a few more times, and the victim's sternum caved in completely. Seeing this, the others surrounded the two and started discussing it. Someone even managed to stay calm enough to shout for everyone to move the victim to the side of the road. The two nervously ran to find them, only to see the waiter trying to do a mukbang on manager Aaron. In-ho didn't have time to think and smashed a wine bottle over her head. Who said you could attack civilians? What part of her looks like a civilian to you? The three of them worked together to push the waiter into the bar. They couldn't stay here forever, so In-ho came up with a plan. He borrowed Yi-yoon's lighter and set a towel on fire. Then he told Yi-yoon to find a bottle of strong liquor. Yi-yoon had just found a bottle of the highest proof liquor when the waiter escaped and ran towards In-ho. Manager Aaron quickly grabbed the bottle, threw it on the tablecloth, and covered the waiter's head with it. In-ho was shaking too much to light the fire. Yi-yoon immediately rushed forward to do it for him, turning her into a living torch. The whole time, Senior Seo had been sitting in the car, which was driving Young-ju crazy. Seeing the wet spot on his crotch, she immediately understood. "Are you okay, buddy?" "Oh, I guess not, huh?" Young-ju was horrified to see a truck speeding towards them like a bat out of hell, with the driver's head sticking out. Alex pounded on the window, urging Senior Seo to get out immediately. "It's gonna flatten you." He had just gotten out of the car when the truck hit. It crashed into a roadside store, killing someone on the spot. The streets were in complete chaos, but there were no police or ambulances to be seen. Because in another part of the city, a commercial plane had crashed into downtown Seoul, causing mass casualties. The military, police, and firefighters were all dispatched to the scene to search for survivors. The entire city was facing an incredibly devastating tragedy. However, the plane crash was only the smallest problem the nation was facing. Martial law had been declared. Yi-yoon's unit received orders to arm themselves and be ready in 5 minutes. Remembering that Yi-yoon and In-ho hadn't returned yet, Sergeant Young called them, but the phone was disconnected. Manager Aaron asked the other two what they were going to do. He could only contact the security department manager now. Everyone else had been scattered. Yi-yoon and In-ho decided to return to base. Aaron told them to use the western fire escape, to not go down to the lower floors, and that he would stay behind to wait for the rescue team. He slipped and fell again. The thud sound alerted a group of zombies, who began chasing the two. The two frantically ran towards the fire escape. Fortunately, the door closed just before the gruesome things could catch them. On Young-ju's side, seeing Senior Seo still lamenting over the car, Alex turned around and dragged him away. Because of this, the three of them got separated, each running in a different direction on the streets, which were now filled with zombies. The base still couldn't contact the other two, so the squad leader suggested going downstairs to look for them, but Sergeant Young refused. Young-ju ran into a small alley, unsure of which way to go, when the owner of a hair salon called her in. Senior Seo finally managed to lose the zombies and stopped by a clothing store to change into a new outfit before going to look for Young-ju. Yi-yoon and In-ho made it to the 75th floor only to find the door locked. Now their only option was to take the north staircase. That meant cutting through the hotel, which sounded risky, but it was better than just standing there doing nothing. Young-ju called her mother. At first, when she found out Young-ju was seeing her boyfriend, she urged her to come home. But then, remembering that the military compound was the safest place at the moment, she told her to get there quickly. Young-ju said she could handle it herself. She repeatedly told her mother not to leave the house until she returned. After that, Young-ju texted Yi-yoon to let him know she was on her way to him, telling him to call her as soon as he got the message. Inside the restaurant, apart from the overturned tables and chairs and the scattered bloodstains, there was no one to be seen. In-ho gestured for Yi-yoon to enter. The moment he stepped inside, he got smacked in the head with a broom. It was receptionist Oh. They had to reassure her several times before she believed they weren't zombies. Despite all the drills they'd done, when faced with a real emergency situation, the soldiers couldn't help but be anxious, but Lieutenant Park seemed even more nervous than they were. He could barely get a few sentences out without his voice trembling, so Sergeant Young had to take over. Their duty at this point was to prioritize air defense, so they would protect the rooftop as best they could. However, under martial law, the order might change, so they would be issued rifles, and their military IDs must be kept safe, unless they wanted to end up leaving like a nameless body. Because of the risk of accidental gunfire, live ammunition would be issued when the situation escalated. For now, everyone was to get into position, ready. Senior Gu spotted golf clubs in an open trunk. As he was about to grab one to use as a weapon, he was unexpectedly hit on the head. This guy had been targeting him from the clothing store, deliberately following him to rob him. Luckily, he was near where young Ju was hiding. Otherwise, he probably would have woken up somewhere far away. Yi Yoon wanted to use the emergency phone, but if it worked, receptionist Oh wouldn't still be here. There was a landline at the restaurant's cashier counter, but it was swarming with zombies. In-ho had been studying what was usable. He figured they could use the solvent and hand sanitizer to get to the phone. The three of them loaded up a cart, constantly watching their surroundings. Suddenly, a head popped out from behind the bar, then ducked back, then popped out again. It abruptly jumped onto the bar and charged toward them. Yi Yoon immediately pressed the spray nozzle and flicked his lighter, and a burst of flames engulfed the zombie's head. They thought that had killed it, but the charred head suddenly twitched. It screamed and lunged at receptionist Oh, but In-ho quickly used a vegetable peeler on its head. Seeing it still twitching, he stabbed harder, causing half of the head to fly off. Having the whole zombie fall on her caused receptionist Oh to panic and lose her senses. She froze up, and the other two helped her to her feet. Looking down from the rooftop, Lieutenant Park anxiously inquired about Yi Yoon and In-ho. Sergeant Young's card hadn't shown payment notification, so he thought they hadn't made it to the gas station and were likely trapped somewhere in the building. Sergeant Young decided to go downstairs with the squad leader to find the two, and also assess the situation down there. Senior CO had regained consciousness. He was insistent on going to the police station. Young Ju wanted the hairdresser to come with them, but she wanted to stay. They just said goodbye when a crowd of zombies appeared behind her. The three of Yi Yoon reached the hotel only to hear the screams of many zombies. They were about to run away from there when they discovered Chief fighting them alone. Although receptionist Oh and In-ho came to lend a hand, this glasses was about to fail. Dunn hugged his head, trying to think of a way to help him. An idea sparked in his head. He hastily brought the cart over, then lit it. Counting down to 3, when the other 3 let go and ran, he pushed the cart into the horde of zombies to incinerate them. But the fire hadn't burned for long before the sprinkler system extinguished it. Fortunately, all 4 of them managed to get inside in the end. That guy Fat, the head chef, couldn't take it anymore and collapsed. He was completely exhausted. Jun supported him from behind, telling the other 2 to run upstairs and find help at the police station. At this point, a large crowd was waiting, all civilians, with no sign of a single police officer. In the crowd, young Ju saw Alex. He'd arrived a while ago, seeing more and more people coming, and fearing that if something happened, he wouldn't be able to escape, so he came outside earlier. Young Ju told him to wait another 10 minutes. If things were still the same, the 3 of them would leave together. Alex told them they should turn off their phones. Earlier, when all hell broke loose, someone's phone rang. Senior CO's phone had been stolen. Young Ju quickly texted Jun, then turned his phone off too. Sergeant Young and the squad leader had just unlocked the door when they ran into In-ho and receptionist Oh. Seeing her covered in blood, Sergeant Young and the squad leader immediately became wary. In-ho quickly explained for her, then shouted down, "Tell Jun to come up here quickly." Jun helped the head chef up there. Jun felt like he was about to die, but for young Ju, he had to survive. According to what Alex had found out, the riots weren't just happening in South Korea, but also in the US and Europe. There were a few theories being tossed around, like it originated from someone who ate a Komodo lizard from a lab in China, or North Korean biological weapons. Some people even thought it was happening because of global warming. At this moment, there was a commotion behind them. A rough-looking group of people barged into the police station. They looked like hunters, so Alex figured these guys were here to get guns, since all the armaments were kept at the nearest police station. Jun was reprimanded by the sergeant for daring to bring civilians into a military zone. He didn't care what the sergeant said, he just wanted to get back his phone that had been confiscated earlier. Suddenly, the fire escape made a loud noise. Then there were countless footsteps getting closer and closer. Jun said, "They did it again, the zombies broke through the door. We have to close the door immediately." Sergeant Young immediately sent people to close the door. He wanted to hear Jun's explanation about this, but Jun's mind was a mess. He didn't know where to start. He just knew that if the door was breached, everyone would die. In-ho said, "They're zombies." But Sergeant Young didn't believe it. Jun stepped forward to help receptionist Oh support the head chef, when suddenly, he collapsed and wasn't breathing anymore. The door made a loud crash, attracting everyone's attention. Suddenly, the head chef, who everyone thought was dead, slowly stood up. Seeing his face, Jun recoiled in horror. Receptionist O was frozen in place. Feeling like waiting any longer was pointless, Alex suggested leaving. This was no time to be in a crowded place. Suddenly, there was a gunshot. Some zombies ran out from inside, followed by the hunting group from earlier. The three of them hurriedly ran away, fearing that if they were a bit slow, they'd be in deep trouble. The head chef had turned into a zombie. It was at this point that someone noticed a bite mark on his leg. The situation happened so unexpectedly that no one knew how to react. No problem, young Ju managed to knock the head chef backward, surely crushing receptionist O in the process. Sergeant Young fired at the head chef's head, but because they were blanks, it had no effect. Jun, to save the sergeant, was grabbed by the head chef, so he quickly took off his hat to escape. Hyung-bi kicked the head chef towards Jun-yu, telling him to use a chokehold from their combat training. But he was a zombie. He didn't feel pain. Yi-yoon and the others frantically tried to stop them, but they ignored them and even kicked the chef a few times because they didn't trust him. The zombie paused, and back was terrified, practically begging their superiors to send outside help. The head chef slowly lifted Jun-yu up, then turned and bit into his stomach, causing him to scream out in agony. When they pulled the head chef off, his mouth was covered in a mess of blood and flesh. While the others swarmed around Jun-yu, it was Wei who knew what was most important. If they didn't finish off the head chef, he would keep attacking. Despite the sergeant's protests, Wei still took action. The sergeant thought he was killing indiscriminately. Jun knew why he did it, but now he was also confused and didn't know how to explain it to everyone. Luckily, Sergeant Young eventually let it go. Jun-yu writhed in extreme pain, and they tried everything they could to stop the bleeding, but nothing worked. Suddenly, he sat bolt upright, vomited blood, and then passed out. Despite their best efforts to save him, he didn't make it. Hyung-bi collapsed in grief, blaming himself for putting his friend in this situation. Sergeant Young told Yi-yoon and Wei to follow him to the control room. After listening to their story from beginning to end, the sergeant returned their phones so they could call their families. It was then that Dee received Young Ju's message that she was coming to him. His mind exploded. Young Ju and her two companions ran into a small bar to avoid the zombies. They stared blankly at the restaurant across the street, filled with the walking dead, and the street outside was even worse. Feeling temporarily safe, Young Ju's empty stomach finally dared to rumble. Alex went to find something for her to eat. That's when Young Ju noticed an album that Dun had always been searching for. He loved Jong Zin's music. She had listened to it so much that she knew the lyrics by heart without even trying to learn them. Young Ju had turned off her phone, so Di Young couldn't get through. The squad leader called his mother, who was at the reception desk. Borrowing Ji's phone, called her brother. Learning she didn't have a boyfriend, he was overjoyed. Hyung-bi hid in the storage room, calling his mother and crying, telling her that Jun-yu had died. Kay didn't call anyone, but watched the news to stay informed about the current situation. And called home to check on his wife and kids, telling his wife what to do and what not to do. Alex found some pastries, fruit, and milk. While they were talking, they learned that Alex was staying at the Iden Hotel. Hearing that Young Ju's boyfriend was stationed on the roof of the building, he pulled out a photo. Coincidentally, one of the soldiers he had photographed was Yi-yoon. Seeing Yi-yoon, Young Ju started to sob. She turned on her phone and saw that he had sent her many messages. He told her not to come, to find a safe place and hide, and then message him so he could come to her. However, when she tried to call Yi-yoon, she couldn't connect because there were too many calls being made. Increasingly worried about him, she decided to go there now. Alex offered to go with her since his car was parked there too. Senior didn't want to go, but being left alone. Sergeant Young announced to the team, "At the current rate of rations, we only have enough food for another 2 days." Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. It seemed even the electricity wouldn't last much longer. For now, the rations would be cut. They would have to hold out for as long as possible. It's not much, but let's enjoy it while we can. As soon as he finished speaking, the lieutenant demanded to eat noodles, saying that he couldn't bear to see everyone suffering. Sergeant Young reluctantly told Jai Young to boil water, and then Young Ju, going left and right, detoured several times to avoid the zombies. After walking for a while, Young Ju tripped because her shoelace came undone. In that instant, she couldn't help but think of Yi-yoon back at the base. Everyone was rushing to eat, except for Hyung-bi. Suddenly, In-ho wondered why Jun-yu hadn't turned into a zombie after being bitten. Receptionist Oh had the same question. Suddenly, there was loud banging on the door outside. Everyone was in here, there couldn't be anyone alive out there anymore. The squad leader had definitely locked all the emergency exits. Sergeant Jung slowly approached the door. As soon as he touched the handle, he kicked the door hard, sending the person on the other side flying back. It was Jun-yu. Guilt drove Hung-bi insane. He ran straight to Jun-yu and was bitten on the forehead. Sergeant Jung pulled Jun-yu away and ordered someone to bring a blanket and a rifle. The others took Hung-bi inside for first aid. Seeing that he had stopped breathing, Kai Rang immediately began chest compressions. But Hung-bi was dead. He would transform. "Oh my god, cover that hole," shouted Rum. In-ho grabbed a pan and bashed Jun-yu in the head with it, then dragged him away. Kai Ik-sik covered him with a blanket. Then the sergeant fired. Jun-yu fell, but then stood up again. Rum told the sergeant to shoot him in the head. Young-ju was the only girl in the all-male engineering department. While everyone wanted to catch her eye, she only paid attention to the one who didn't notice her. She invited Yi-yoon to pair up for homework, but he refused bluntly, saying he already had a partner. During lunch break, Young-ju was fast asleep when some guy hit the locker with a ball, startling her awake. Because of that, she overheard Run saying that he rejected her because she wasn't pretty or charming. It seemed like the heavens were displeased on Young-ju's behalf, so they made Run come to work at her ice cream shop. "I may be ugly and unattractive, but I'll try to train you well, Yi-yoon." That night, while waiting for the bus, she called her best friend to confide in her, a person who had never been disappointed with her appearance. Being called ugly for 22 years had hit her hard. She thought she was getting uglier. "At least I'm not someone who looks like a flounder and a toad combined." Young-ju suddenly had an odd feeling. Then she ended up trash-talking someone and they heard the whole thing from beginning to end. In times like these, she just needed to flash a confident smile. Once, Young-ju encountered a customer who was looking for trouble. He demanded that they compensate him. When he didn't get his way, he threw a glass. Luckily, Yi-yoon pulled her out of the way just in time. He even took out his phone and threatened to report him for his actions. Only then did the customer leave. After that incident, the two apologized to each other for the insults, but from that day on, Young-ju fell in love with Yi-yoon without realizing it. Just when she thought she had suppressed her feelings, one of his smiles would blow everything away. Until one day when her feelings had grown so strong that she couldn't hide them anymore, Young-ju decided to confess. That Christmas, she gave Run a scarf that she had knitted herself, but he refused it and told her to give it to someone else. Not giving up, when they were alone, Young-ju gave him the gift again, but all she got in return was an apology and the words, "I'm not interested in dating you." Young-ju pretended to be okay and continued working. A senior coworker was curious as to why Yi-yoon had rejected her, and he confided that he felt he wasn't good enough for Young-ju. Despite trying to restrain herself, Young-ju finally couldn't hold back her tears. She asked to leave early and ran out of the store. Thinking about how she looked earlier, Young-ju just wanted to hide. Suddenly, Yi-yoon appeared and handed her his jacket. He was about to explain something, but she didn't want to hear it. She had only run a few steps before tripping over her shoelaces. She said, "What a humiliating day. These crazy shoelaces keep coming undone. Let me show you how to tie them so they don't come undone. Watch, just once. You're actually very beautiful." While tying her shoelaces, Young-ju was reminiscing, making Senior Gu get all flustered. "Hurry it up for me, please." Right after Sergeant Jung took down Jun-yu, he was next. Transforming, it unexpectedly lunged at him, causing the sergeant to recoil in fear, getting splattered with gore. Then it immediately turned to attack him. Seeing that platoon leader Tran had already grabbed his gun, he apologized to him. Then a gunshot rang out. Young-ju and the two others were passing an intersection when they encountered a young boy standing there, throwing up. He had a bite mark on his calf. The other two were about to bludgeon him, but Young-ju stopped them. "Are you guys insane? Go kill those things. Why would you beat up someone who's already been bitten?" Figuring the kid was probably nearing the transformation stage, the three of them decided to ignore him. Suddenly, he started convulsing, begging them to help him, saying he didn't want to die. Touched by his plea, Young-ju wanted to bring him along. Senior CO refused, annoyed, saying, "If he doesn't like it, he can go. His whining is giving me a headache." Just then, the boy's phone started ringing. They frantically searched for it and turned it off. but it was too late. The zombies heard it and swarmed towards them, giving chase. Hyung-bi was shot in the head, but not by Zombie Jun. It was Oh, the receptionist. Sergeant Young finally reacted, snatching the gun from her hand and telling Hai Rang to take her back to the refugee camp. The others cleared away the bodies of those who had fallen. The continuous stream of events left Lieutenant Park looking haggard, pale as if he were about to die. The sergeant told him to rest and try to calm down. Young-ju and the others took refuge in a grilled tripe restaurant for safety. They had to tie the boy up. Senior CO didn't want to take him along because no one knew when he would transform. Young-ju thought that tying him up and gagging him was enough. Neither of them would yield, and Alex didn't try to mediate. They would probably argue until dawn. The boy started to feel nauseous again. They reluctantly removed the gag. "How much did you drink, exactly?" "Let's see. For round 1, I finished a whole bottle of Beiju at Do-young restaurant. For round 2, 2 bottles of Saju at Hangang Park. And for round 3, we ate hangover soup and drank a few more glasses of rice wine. That's also when you got bitten." The boy was preparing to take the college entrance exam for the 3rd time. If he failed this time, he'd have to enlist. He just wanted to go out drinking one last time before hitting the books, but this happened instead. Suddenly, Alex had a hypothesis. Before he could speak, a police zombie came charging at them out of nowhere. It actually ignored the boy and ran straight for Young-ju. She accidentally tripped, causing it to trip as well, and as a result, an entire shelf of items fell directly onto its head. Alex used the breathalyzer from the zombie to test it. The boy had been observing him from the moment they met him, and the zombies hadn't even touched him, only targeting Young-ju. There are only 2 possibilities. Either zombies don't attack drunk people, or if you're drunk when you get bitten, you don't transform. It's just a theory, but let's try drinking and see what happens. This level should be good enough. They had to move out the next morning, so they would just drink steadily from now until then. Young-ju tried calling Yi-yoon, but still couldn't get through. She texted him, telling him that she was hiding in the grilled tripe restaurant and to call her as soon as he saw the message. Looking at the glass of alcohol, Young-ju remembered her boyfriend. At her father's funeral, she had given Yi-yoon her father's lighter because he wanted him to have it. She had bought it with her allowance as a gift for her father's birthday when she was little, and he always carried it with him, even though he didn't smoke. Now it belonged to Yi-yoon. Yi-yoon tossed and turned all night, unable to sleep. He was worried sick about Young-ju and how she was doing. Clutching his lighter tightly, he prayed 1,000 times for her safety. In-ho, curious, asked receptionist Oh, "How were you such a good shot yesterday?" She told them to keep it a secret, explaining that she used to be a competitive shooter in school and had even been on the national team's reserve squad. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and everyone quickly gathered outside. Everyone was present except for Lieutenant Park. Sergeant Young cautiously went into the control room to investigate and abruptly ran out, his face ashen. He'd witnessed something horrific in a very short amount of time. Lieutenant Park, unable to cope any longer, had taken his own life. Meanwhile, Young-ju was drunk and rambling nonsense to the young kid, much to Senior Gu's annoyance. They'd both reached copper rank, but how would someone with the kid's eyesight and weak limbs ever deal with zombies? The kid didn't understand why they kept insisting on going to that building. Alex explained that it was safe because there were guards there, and his car was there too, containing a full set of high-quality survival gear. Upon hearing this, Young-ju staggered to her feet, grabbed a golf club, and went out to bash zombies. Senior Gu frantically ran after her, and the kid followed suit. Alex, however, remained seated, muttering to himself that just sitting there worrying wasn't the way to go. Dong decided to leave and find Young-ju. In-ho, hearing this, also wanted to go, wanting to protect his wife and children. Wait a minute, does that mean we'd be deserting? Oblivious to fear, Young-ju went to the intersection, yelling and ready to go all out against the zombies. Senior Gu dragged her from street to street, eventually hiding behind a car. Young-ju giggled, watching him squirm with fear. The kid stubbornly insisted that Senior Gu untie him, and when he refused, Young-ju grabbed his head and yanked it like he owed her money. "You little brat," Senior Gu quickly untied him and told him to scram. The kid ran a short distance away and honked the horn, luring the zombies away and creating a distraction for the two of them. In just one night, 2 soldiers had died, and now Lieutenant Park too. Sergeant Young couldn't help but think about joining him. He was about to pull the trigger when Yi-yoon and In-ho walked in. The two of them stared blankly at him, and he quickly wiped his mouth and claimed he was reenacting Lieutenant Park's death, which they immediately believed. Afterwards, the two reported to the sergeant that there was an even bigger problem than the food shortage. The power outage the previous night was due to a lack of ats. The hotel's power had switched from the external grid to the internal generator. They had running water because the water tank was still functioning, but both the tank and the water pump were now powered by the generator. Once the generator ran out of power, the water supply would be cut off. They would likely be out of water within a few days. At that moment, the phone rang. It was the battalion commander, informing them that a supply helicopter would be landing at 12 o'clock and instructing them to prepare for its arrival at the base. Everyone was overjoyed, except for Yi Yun, who was uneasy. This was their first time handling a helicopter landing, so they were bound to be clumsy. The sergeant instructed everyone to just follow their training. Everyone had to wear bulletproof vests, including receptionists though. On the rooftop, Kyung-sik was responsible for contacting the helicopter, while the squad leader was to provide guidance signals for it. Despite it being their first time welcoming a helicopter and seeing it this close, everyone felt that it seemed to be swaying a lot. Kyung-sik hadn't been able to contact the other side. In-ho, disregarding regulations, ran straight to the landing pad to report to Sergeant Young. He showed him the photo he had taken. Sergeant Young immediately ran back to his room to grab his binoculars for a better look. Senior CO pulled Young Ju into a convenience store. He blocked the entrance, preventing the kid from coming in, and taunted him. Naya, no zombies in here. They can take a break for a bit." Young Ju and the kid each grabbed a beer. Outside, Alex was fighting a one versus many battle. The two of them watched and cheered him on. Another commotion erupted outside. This time, it was a baseball team staring at the two drunks, yelling and heckling incessantly. Senior CO was beyond annoyed after seeing what was happening from the helicopter. Sergeant Young commanded, "Everyone, raise your weapons, lock and load onto the helicopter. Anti-aircraft team, get in position." Because it was their first time in actual combat, everyone was clueless, just staring at each other. Too scared to shoot. Someone fired the first shot, and everyone else followed suit. As soon as the helicopter was within range, the platoon leader immediately opened fire. He hit the tail, causing the helicopter to wobble and begin to fall. Young Ju's group also saw the scene. Alex urged the kid to go ahead and scout, and then they quickly moved towards the building. Sergeant Young was furious when the battalion commander forced him to compensate for shooting down the helicopter. He tried to suppress his anger. If they couldn't get resupplied again, the sergeant wanted the battalion commander to allow them to move to the base camp in Guso. But he only received a cold response, "Just wait there." Unable to wait any longer, Sergeant Young decided to find a way out for his men himself. "That's it, everyone is leaving this building." Everyone gave all sorts of reasons not to leave, but in just a few days the water would be cut off, and they would slowly die. If they didn't act now, they should use their remaining strength to find a way to survive. If that's the case, Receptionist O requests permission to use a gun. She's pretty sure she's a better shot than most people here, at least he should let her fight for herself. Young Ju's group of 4 had reached the outside of the building, but the entrance was blocked by zombies. Yet, Young Ju still wanted to charge in with just a golf club. Everyone advised her to find a safe place to hide and wait for news from Jun. "First, let's get the car and then figure it out." The parking lot was huge. Who knew how long it would take to find it if they just walked around? Alex suggested that the 4 split into 2 groups to find his car. A seafoam green Homer with license plate 4th 574. Senior CO and Young Ju were talking and not paying attention. They only reacted when the other 2 yelled, and they turned around and ran. The 2 of them were surrounded on the hood of a car. Alex threw a Molotov cocktail into the zombies to clear a path for them. Senior Gu saw an opening and quickly pulled Young Ju away. Alex held them back and ran after them. Unfortunately, he was grabbed by one and torn apart by the horde. In a moment of panic, Young Ju wanted to run back, but Senior CO pulled her into the waiting room and locked the door. Outside, the kid was punching and kicking the zombies, yelling Alex's name. But in the end, he could only watch as Alex was engulfed by the flames. The kid's helpless cries echoed through the space. Young Ju collapsed, sobbing in despair, while Senior CO was stunned into silence. On the rooftop, everyone was ready under Sergeant Young's orders. They started to open the doors and leave the base. The plan was to take the stairs to the VIP waiting room, then take the elevator. The dead are dead, the living still have to live. Senior CO loudly ordered the kid to go to another area to find a car. He's spacing out. I should scare him for fun. So what now? What do you want? Go find a car and drive it back here. I don't know how to drive. Why didn't you get a license? I was too busy studying. Say another word and I'll bite you. At this moment, young Ju had an idea. Jun's team finally made it down to the hotel. It didn't seem like there were any zombies here, but to be sure, Sergeant Young told them to go in pairs and clear the waiting room. If there were no threats, proceed with weapons maintenance, because the condition of their weapons would determine the outcome of the next battle. After that, they would move down to the lobby. The kid walked until his legs were completely numb. Finally, he found Alex's car. The license plate and color were right. Excuse me, can you let me through? After getting in the car, he started a video call with young Ju so that Senior CO could guide him on how to drive. One was clueless, and the other had a temper like a blowtorch. They had only just started the engine, and it was already louder than a marketplace. It was his first time sitting in the driver's seat, and in such a heavy, big car, he was scared to death, screaming so loudly that he drowned out Senior CO's voice. Hey, are you even listening? Hey, kid, Jesus, could you keep it down a little, for crying out loud? Yi-yoon and In-ho checked the restrooms, thankfully not stumbling upon any nasty secrets. Sergeant went with receptionist Oh and Kai rang into the kitchen. There was still plenty of food here. Because they didn't know how long they'd be isolated, Sergeant told them to gather light and high-energy snacks. While washing his face to wake up, In-ho discovered Wi-Fi. Seeing this, Dun immediately took out his phone to call young Ju. Young Ju answered immediately. Both were overjoyed to finally see each other. Look at me. I'm not hurt. You're not either. I'm not sure about later, though. I'm in the building's parking garage. What floor are you on? Wait for me. I'm coming up to you. Dun panicked. She shouldn't have come here. There were zombies everywhere. How could she get up here? He lied, saying he wasn't there anymore, and told young Ju to go to the area where the army was setting up camp, and they'd meet there. Just as he finished speaking, his phone died. Young Ju went ballistic, screaming and attracting the zombies. In-ho reassured Dun, if your girlfriend could get here, it means her chances of survival are high, so don't worry too much. Let's get out of here first. Suddenly, there was the sound of gunfire outside. The two rushed to see what was happening. On the kid's side, the call had suddenly been cut off, and they couldn't call back. The car was driving like a bat out of hell, and he kept fearing he would crash into the wall. It turned out that Kyung-sik and the squad leader had run into 4 zombies. Suddenly, another zombie charged at the squad leader from behind. Kyung-sik calmly shot and killed it. Then the 4 went down to the restaurant with the 3 others in the kitchen. Sergeant Young discovered another person there, Ba-ul. He was talking normally, and a check showed no bite marks. He said that everyone had suddenly gone crazy, which scared him so much that he hid in the storage room and downed a bunch of sleeping pills. He had just woken up. Ba-ul wanted them to take him to the embassy, but it wasn't even certain that they could get out of the building alive. What did he need an embassy for at this point? Ba-ul kept whining about being hungry, which irritated Sergeant Young. Receptionist Oh had to step in and mediate. The two noticed that the zombies were following the car, which annoyed the kid. Gathering courage from who knows where, he floored it and sped forward, drifted through a turn, and then appeared, looking incredibly cool, in front of the waiting room to pick up the other 2. I feel like I'm gonna puke. Alright, I'll take it from here. Senior CO charged out onto the road like a mad bull. He kept ramming into the zombies, scaring the hell out of the other 2. Young Ju screamed until her voice was hoarse before he stopped. The kid defended her, and Senior CO cursed him out. I'm getting pretty pissed off at you, buddy. His eyes are bloodshot. Do you want to get bitten? Go ahead, bite him. I'll bite him hard for you. Senior CO got scared and didn't dare say anything more. He floored it toward Sue's station. After cleaning up, everyone planned to eat, then rest for a bit before continuing on. Now it was just about life or death. There were no more rules, so everyone took out cigarettes and started smoking. Sergeant Young wanted to drink alcohol, and Kyung-sik went to get some, but he said it wasn't necessary. Suddenly, Sergeant heard a strange noise in the vent. He gripped his gun tightly, trying to remain calm. Immediately after, the others heard the sound of gunfire and his screams. The squad leader tried calling him. Then a zombie appeared, only the upper half of its body remaining. It crawled towards them like a machine. Everyone fired wildly, but only O's receptionist shot killed it. At this moment, Sergeant Jai Young slowly emerged. Seeing his appearance, everyone was stunned into silence. Their eyes were filled with despair. The bite near his head meant he was quickly infected. The squad leader raised his gun towards the sergeant, his eyes filled with conflict. With the last vestiges of his consciousness, the sergeant looked deeply into his eyes, a tear serving as his plea. "Please, just end it for me." Senior CO wanted to go to CO-UN hospital before heading to Gazo. His mother owned the hospital, so they could have their injuries checked out first before going. Young Ju agreed it made sense. Just then, the boy felt nauseous and insisted on getting out of the car. Suddenly, he said he wanted to go home to study. He believed the world would quickly recover from the pandemic, and while everyone else was distracted, he'd get ahead. The zombies nearby heard the talking and started moving towards them. Young Ju was still worried. She didn't feel comfortable leaving him alone. "It's nothing. No worry, don't worry," Mom said. "Going home to study is the right thing to do." She suppressed the discomfort in her arm. The boy was intentionally talking rudely to drive them away. Senior CO understood and drove off immediately. The zombies chasing after them were stopped by the boy. Young Ju looked back at him with concern. They still didn't know his name. Senior CO thought this was a good place to part ways. "No worry, he's about to turn." They hadn't gone far when the boy lost control, his body starting to contort. In the hotel, there was still one person who hadn't turned yet, the manager, Aaron. At that moment, the radio broadcasted an announcement to the nation. The government has established emergency shelters at Suo Station. Therefore, Line 3 to Suo, which has been suspended for a long time, will be reopened at 6 p.m. The train will depart from Daegu Station and only stop at 3 rest stops. That was it. Manager Aaron decided to go out and fight the zombies. He wrapped himself up completely and took a few swigs of liquor to boost his courage. The zombies heard the noise and were drawn in, but they ignored Aaron, just like the boy. Sergeant Jai Young was gone. The squad leader was now the highest-ranking officer there. Yi Yoon hoped he would snap out of it soon so he could lead them. Lingering any longer wouldn't do any good, so the squad leader told them to prepare to leave. O's receptionist also gave his gun to Paolo. From now on, he'd have to fight to protect himself. At the same time, Aaron found a staple gun in the staff room. "Ladies and gentlemen, please don't wander around with your bloody feet. This is a high-end hotel with 5-star service. Got it, you bastards?" After the announcement, people flocked to the nearest train station to catch the train to Suo. Why didn't this area seem infected? There were no zombies in sight. Stuck in traffic, Young Ju and Senior CO were inching forward. Suddenly, someone came and stole their car. They kicked them out and sped off. Luckily, they were close to a train pickup point and could walk from there. The elevator was still working fine. Yi Yoon and the others quickly pressed the button to go down. They waited anxiously, not knowing what awaited them when the elevator doors opened. But when they reached the 58th floor, the elevator stopped. It was Manager Aaron. There were a lot of people gathered at the platform. Although the speakers kept announcing that everyone should remain calm and orderly while waiting for the train to arrive, no one wanted to be left behind or have to wait for another train. People in the back kept pushing forward. Senior CO told Yi Yoon to hold on tight so he wouldn't get lost. But when the speaker announced that the rescue train was about to arrive, everyone panicked and rushed forward all at once, pressing those in front against the glass doors, unable to move. The crowd pushed and shoved violently, separating Senior CO and Young Ju. At that moment, the glass doors couldn't withstand the pressure and shattered, instantly crushing hundreds of people. The horrifying scene sent the remaining survivors into a panic, but they didn't have time to mourn anyone. Everyone surged onto the train. As soon as the doors opened, several people with makeshift weapons kept a wary eye on Aaron. It wasn't that they didn't want him to come along, but he'd been bitten on the leg. Kyung-sik wanted to shoot him before he turned, but Derun stopped him. The team leader also told them to focus on getting down to the lobby. Receptionist O couldn't bear to leave Aaron behind. Not wanting to put her in a difficult position, Aaron told her to go with them and not to cry, because it would make him sad. Receptionist O sobbed, begging them to let her say goodbye to Aaron. Suddenly, there was cracking from the ceiling of the cabin, growing louder and more frequent, along with the appearance of blood. Oh no, everyone immediately ran away from the elevator. Young Ju was disoriented when a kind person pulled her onto the train. But seeing the poor grandmother and grandson, she decided to give up her spot to the boy. The old woman thanked her profusely. She ran alongside the train, telling her grandson, "Wait for me at the end point, I'll come find you." Young Ju was trying to reassure the old woman when the scene before her choked the words in her throat. The train was full of zombies. The others were devastated. Young Ju happened to spot Senior Sao's watch among the piles of mangled flesh. The old woman suddenly pulled out a knife, ran down to the tracks, and chased after the train. Worried, Young Ju ran after her. Just then, another train arrived behind them. In that moment, Young Ju felt like giving up. The train stopped right in front of her, snapping her back to reality. She quickly helped the old woman up and guided her to stand close to the wall. Accidentally, Young Ju noticed a bite mark on the old woman's leg. Next to her was someone about to transform, and in front of her was a moving train. With danger on all sides, Young Ju felt like she was going to explode. Ultimately, the old woman turned into a zombie. If she wanted to survive, she only had one choice. Young Ju listlessly walked back to the platform. From behind, she heard her mother calling her. She instinctively turned around and started walking towards the voice. Standing in front of the technical room, Young Ju opened the door and stepped inside. A horde of zombies fell down the elevator shaft, causing everyone to scatter. It was every person for themselves, find a hiding place first and then figure things out. Paolo ran after Jun and In-ho. They found a room with the door already open. Bang and Receptionist Oh found a room key, but they didn't know which room it belonged to. Luckily, the door opened on the third try. Aaron, Team Leader Young, and Kyung-sik still hadn't found a place to hide. Aaron stayed behind, holding off the zombies for the other two. The team leader found an unlocked room at the end of the hall. Unexpectedly, Kyung-sik pushed him into the room and locked the door, trapping Aaron outside. Aaron pounded on the door for a while, but they still didn't open it. By now, zombies were swarming all around him, and Aaron gave up trying. "Come and get me." But he didn't realize that if they wanted to attack, they would have rushed him already, instead of slowly shuffling, giving him time to prepare. Only then did he realize the zombies were ignoring him. He waved his hand in front of them, and they didn't even try to bite. Ding dong. The ceiling of the team leader's room was cracking, and the team leader was questioning Kyung-sik's actions when the doorbell rang. "It's me, still alive," the team leader profusely apologized, but Aaron didn't blame him. "As for you, Kyung-sik, you better watch out." Young Ju, her head still in the clouds, suddenly saw a group of zombies, which snapped her back to reality. She quickly dodged in another direction. Not knowing where to go, she heard her mother's voice again, coming from a room. It seemed to be someone's office. Young Ju took the opportunity to charge her phone. She called to run, but there was no answer. Young Ju was calmer now. First, she applied medicine to the wound on her face. Then she started looking for suitable tools to use as weapons. A chainsaw, perfect. Once they had stabilized, everyone called each other to share their situation. They couldn't stay for too long, but they didn't have enough bullets to deal with the zombies. The team leader wanted to hear everyone's ideas. Yi-yoon thought they could use grenades to escape through the fire escape. In-ho reminded them that the explosion might attract zombies from other floors, making this method impractical. Meanwhile, Jae-young confessed his feelings to Receptionist Oh. If they both made it out of this alive, he wanted to date her. For the past 22 years, Jae-young had lived a meaningless life, devoid of purpose. Whether he lived or died didn't make much difference, but with Receptionist Oh's promise, he would have a reason to try and survive. Jae-young had mentally prepared himself for rejection, so he almost jumped for joy when she agreed. Before Young Ju could celebrate, she discovered that the chainsaw was broken. Ironically, she happened to have an engineering degree, though she never expected it would be used in this kind of situation. With a weapon ready, it was time to hit the road. In-ho took a lap around the room and noticed a ventilation shaft. It was large enough for them to crawl through, but before he could tell done, there was a doorbell ring outside. "This is a dead end, let's get out of here." Yi-yoon started to open the door, but Aaron stopped him. "They won't bite me, but they'll bite them." "Why won't they bite you?" "We'll talk about it later." But Aaron had a way for them to get out, the ventilation shaft in the middle of the room. If they crawled through the ductwork, they would end up downstairs, which was exactly what In-ho wanted to say. After that, Yi-yoon summarized the escape plan for the others. There was a ventilation shaft in each room. They would have to remove the grates and widen the opening so that a person could squeeze through. There weren't any zombies in there, but for safety's sake, they still had to proceed with caution. The ductwork would lead to the main escape route. which was the path to get downstairs. Finally, they would use the stairs to get to the ground floor. Of course, they couldn't just wander around aimlessly in there. Aaron would mark the way so they would know which direction to go. He had been present when the ductwork was installed, so he knew the way. 30 minutes later, everyone was ready. After relaying the message over the radio, everyone began struggling to crawl through the ductwork. On the other side, young Ju also started to move. She hid behind a cabinet and started the chainsaw. Just as she was about to charge forward, a zombie bit her on the head from behind. The scream and the sound of the chainsaw attracted other zombies. They were swarming, and it was best to run. Yi Yoon's group of 3 crawled to a junction and found only a circle with no arrows. This section was where Aaron would guide them. With only 5 minutes to go, Receptionist Oh was already breathless with exhaustion. Jae Young immediately showed her a crawling position that would be less strenuous. As they were talking, a zombie suddenly appeared in front of Jae Young, its eyes dangling. It lunged at him, scaring him half to death. Luckily, Receptionist Oh managed to stab it in the head in time. At this point, the ductwork in the direction of the arrow was full of zombies, forcing the 2 of them to crawl in the opposite direction. The space was narrow, and they were fast. One was even crawling like a spider, leaving Receptionist Oh with nothing but a desperate scream. Young Ju was being chased by more and more zombies. She frantically ran into a narrow alley, then turned around and slashed at the zombies. Just when they thought they were going to die there, they were lucky enough that the hideous zombie got pulled back by the others. The 2 of them crawled frantically forward, and as soon as they got to the corner, they bumped into Kyung-sik. The 4 of them had to crawl back. However, they ran into a dead end. Just then, the hideous zombie broke free and rushed towards them. Kyung-sik turned around and told the other 2 to duck, and then he started firing at them. Yi Yoon heard the gunshots and immediately called on the radio, but no one responded. He wanted to go back to help, but Aaron and In-ho immediately stopped him, fearing that their own lives weren't guaranteed, let alone saving others. Paolo saw that they were stopped for too long and selfishly left first. Just after he left, the other 3 heard a scream from Young Ju's side. She chopped off the head of every zombie that came at her. Heads and bodies were falling like ripe fruit until their corpses piled up like a small mountain. The other zombies couldn't climb over them, so she continued to run. Some escaped and chased closely behind. Finally, Young Ju escaped into a stairwell and locked them outside. The area was relatively quiet. Exhausted both physically and mentally, she let her guard down and drifted off to sleep without realizing it. Paolo had his ear bitten off by a zombie. He would soon transform. In-ho wanted to put him down, but Aaron, the manager, had an idea. They took Paolo out to the ventilation shaft and gave him some liquor. If he didn't transform like Aaron, they'd keep him around. Otherwise, they'd let him drop. The result was 1 less survivor and 1 more zombie. The remaining 4 navigated past the zombie corpses and continued towards the exit. At a fork in the road, Kyung-sik spotted a group of zombies trapped in the distance. He went to fire again but realized he was out of ammo. Kyung-sik signaled the other 3 to stop and indicated the presence of enemies. He tried to reload as quietly as possible, but unfortunately dropped the magazine, alerting the zombies. Kyung-sik panicked and stumbled back towards the others. Grimly, the zombies drew closer, but as they reached the turn, they were drawn away by an unsettling, almost gleeful sound. Attention valued customers, please proceed this way. Zombies from all over the ventilation system surged forward, then 1 by 1, plummeted straight down into the shaft to keep Paolo company. Young Ju saw a figure in the haze and realized it was Yi Yoon. Overjoyed, she ran to hug him, but Yi Yoon said nothing, only looked down at the bite mark on his hand. Only then did he ask her to kill him, but how could Young Ju do that? Fear jolted her awake from the nightmare. Startled, Young Ju slapped herself to snap out of it and left the emergency staircase. After gathering Yi Yoon's group, they began descending to the lower floor. Because zombies were below, they couldn't go any further. This floor seemed to be under construction. There were no zombies in sight. It seemed safe enough, so the group decided to rest there for a while. Kang questioned Kyung-sik for firing a gun in a confined space. It was lucky that Receptionist Oh was only grazed. What if he had hit her? Kyung-sik retorted flippantly. So what? The squad leader stepped in to mediate, only to be cursed out by him as well. This isn't boot camp. The world's gone to hell. These ranks don't mean anything anymore. Jae Young snapped and punched him. Kyung-sik was equally enraged, pointing his gun at Jae Young. Shut your mouth if you want to live, and drop the gun if you want to live. Kyung-sik immediately changed his tone, saying he was just joking, and they shouldn't be so tense. Aaron told them to stop arguing. There was a freight elevator used to transport construction materials that connected directly to the underground parking garage. If they could find it, they could go straight down. So, it was best to split up and look for it now. After leaving the emergency stairs, Young-ju returned to the station hall. There didn't seem to be many zombies here. As she was walking, she inadvertently heard singing coming from the Lost and Found Center. The voice sounded familiar. Young-ju opened the door and stepped inside, finding that survivors were hiding there, and the singing was coming from Jun's idol. Jun had found the elevator, but it was no longer operational. While everyone was racking their brains, Inho spotted a green scissor lift outside the window, and it appeared to be in good working order. They could use it to get to the first floor, but who would climb down there to turn on the switch? Hearing that, the others simultaneously stepped back, everyone avoiding Yi Yoon's eyes. Only Aaron stepped forward. Of course, thanks a lot. I'm too drunk. People invited Young-ju to listen to music and have a few drinks to forget about the outside world. Someone advised her not to try so hard anymore, saying that staying here was the only way for her to survive. Yi Yoon was rappelling down to the scissor lift. The wind-up here was so strong, he was scared he would piss his pants. He slipped and lost his grip, but luckily it wasn't too high, so he didn't fall all the way. He had to stop for a while to calm down. Only then did he call to report to everyone. Looking at the plumes of smoke all over the city, Yi Yoon couldn't hold back his tears. How did it turn out like this? Is his Young-ju doing okay? While listening to Jong-jin sing, Young-ju reviewed the photos that she and Yi Yoon had taken. Accidentally, she found a video she had never seen before. Because there were words he didn't dare say in front of her, Yi Yoon had waited until she was asleep to say them. He really wanted her to wait for him until he completed his military service. If for some reason they broke up, he wouldn't blame her. As long as she was happy. No matter what happened between them, he would always love her. Thank you, Young-ju. Yi Yoon was also reminiscing when his teammates called him back. He took a deep breath, feeling nervous as he turned on the switch. Luckily for them, it was still working, and everyone cheered with joy. Young-ju on the other side had regained her spirits. Nothing could stop her from finding Yi Yoon. After selecting a few useful items, she was ready to continue fighting. This time, she no longer heard her mother calling, but Yi Yoon, I'm coming, my love. 6 people were moving down. They could see the ground from here. At this rate, they would be out of the building soon. But they celebrated a bit too soon. The elevator suddenly stalled. Hey, is this thing okay? He said he called someone to fix it. When? Back in your grandpa's day. The elevator continued its descent, and everyone pleaded with it. Just a little further, come on. It moved a short distance and then stopped completely. To make matters worse, it tilted to one side. The control panel switched to a red light. Yi Yoon said, I'm an engineer, let me take a look. Well, it should be working again in a few minutes, guys. The intermittent beeping of the red light, combined with their noisy chatter, attracted the zombies on the first floor. One zombie shambled toward them and started banging its head against the door. Hearing the loud noise, others swarmed over. In a panic, Young-ju smacked the control panel with her purse, and miraculously, it started working. However, the zombie wasn't giving up. It finally shattered the glass with its head. A horde of zombies fell down on top of them. Young-ju hadn't expected so many zombies to be there. Everywhere she ran, they poured out. Luckily, she had her scooter, so she quickly outdistanced them. However, the path ahead was blocked. Just then, Yi Yoon's voice rang out. You have to fight, Young-ju. If you gotta fight, then fight. The 6 people, including Yi Yoon, were facing an extremely urgent situation. Not only were there zombies, but they also faced the risk of the elevator cables snapping due to the weight. Eventually, the last few zombies were pushed down below, but another cable snapped, causing the elevator to tilt even further and crash into the window. Yi Yoon yelled for everyone to get out of the elevator immediately. As soon as the other 5 were out, the elevator lost its balance. Yi Yoon didn't have time to escape and was pulled along with it. The elevator plummeted for a short distance before the cables caught it. Yi Yoon was thrown into another level and lost consciousness. It all happened so fast that those upstairs couldn't see clearly. They assumed that Yi Yoon had fallen to his death. After young Ju escaped the zombies, Yi Yun's voice instructed her to follow the train tracks to Kazuo. She eliminated the zombies at the platform and then started walking along the rails. The squad leader had been bitten, but he was hiding it, afraid to speak up. Kyung-sik didn't want to believe Yi Yun was dead. He wanted to go down and check for himself. They argued, and Kyung-sik became furious, yelling, "Yi Yun is dead. Instead of standing here mourning, surviving should be our top priority." Although the words were harsh, it was truly what they needed to focus on. Kyung-sik went outside to have a cigarette when someone woke up Yi Yun in his daze. He drowsily opened his eyes and saw a bear. "What the hell? What are you doing?" Yi Yun angrily wanted to see who was acting crazy in a mascot costume. Then he remembered he was in the middle of an epidemic. Young Ju walked for a while and saw a train. She quickly turned off her light to avoid alerting the zombies. There was a dark figure standing motionless. The figure seemed to see her, and then a man stepped down. Young Ju immediately became wary. The man said he was a human looking for his lost daughter. Suddenly, Yi Yun told her, "Run." She didn't understand why, but then a group of men emerged from behind. They were all men. Young Ju was terrified and ran, but she was immediately hit with a crowbar and fell to the ground. The man thought she had been bitten and told the others to deal with her. Young Ju's scooter was hit and stolen. Not wanting to die there, she swung the crowbar to defend herself and ran. The three men wanted to play a game, so they let her run for a while before chasing her. Yi Yun tried calling upstairs, but no one answered. He was still separated from the ground by a considerable distance. Looking back at the zombies crowding outside the door, Yi Yun was frustrated. Suddenly, an idea popped into his head. He tried luring the mascot zombie a few times, then pulled it out of the window and pushed it down below. Seeing it tumble a few times and get up like nothing happened, he became even more confident that his plan would succeed. Yi Yun put on the huge belly gum mascot costume. "These shoes probably won't be a problem. I'm coming to you, young Ju." Yi Yun jumped headfirst to the ground. Luckily, the mascot costume was thick enough that he wasn't hurt. Suddenly, a zombie fell in front of him. It was Aaron and his group. It seemed like their situation wasn't good. Feeling like running wasn't an option, young Ju took a chance and climbed onto the train. She planned to hide there, but the men saw her. They pretended not to notice. Then, out of nowhere, it sped up, scaring young Ju half to death. Young Ju kept running from one train car to the next until she reached the last one. Walking corpses were in front of her. Monsters in human skin were behind her. Was she destined to die here? At the same time, Aaron and the others were struggling with the zombies outside the door. One person was trying to block the door while the others were trying to kill as many zombies as they could. It was then that In-ho noticed Yi Yun waving at them from below. Knowing he was alive, Aaron and In-ho regained their spirits. Yi Yun looked around and an idea popped into his head. They had to hurry while the zombies were being held back. First, they would secure the elevator's cable to the window frame, and he would detach the other end and attach it to the truck on the street. That way, they'd create a zipline from the 8th floor to the ground. Yi Yun would use mattresses to create a safe landing point. Sliding down was the safest option they had at that moment. Everyone was a bit apprehensive because if their armor tore, they would be done for, but staying there would mean certain death sooner or later. Kyung-sik was the first to go. In-ho was shaking with fear of heights. His hesitation would jeopardize the chances of those who followed, so Jae-young gave him a hand. As soon as he landed, In-ho was afraid he would slide into Yi Yun. When the other three reached the last train car, they only found young Ju's hat on the ground. One guy excitedly picked it up, put it on, and turned on the light, only to be swarmed by zombies as soon as he opened the door. It turned out that because the zombies had all gathered on the other side, young Ju had a chance to climb onto the luggage rack without alerting them. In the chaos, young Ju quickly closed the door and left the train. At that moment, a girl waved, telling her to follow her. She followed without any hesitation. The other three let receptionist O go first. At that moment, Aaron started feeling unwell, and the squad leader was in a similar state. Viang told receptionist O not to be afraid and that he would follow right after her. What a cheesy line, bro, she thought, getting goosebumps. But even though she said that, she felt a sense of warmth and courage. After receptionist O successfully landed, it was Jae-young's turn. Then, the two squad leaders told Aaron to go first. As soon as he asked, "Do you have armor?" he was kicked down. It was then that everyone realized the squad leader wasn't wearing armor. He just looked at them and held up his wrist. "That's right, go on, Squad Leader Phi smiled and said, "I think we'll have to part ways here." Everyone understood what had happened. Aaron hurriedly told him to come down, saying he'd be fine if he drank alcohol. "That's why you got bit, but you haven't changed." In-ho also urged the squad leader to come down first and they'd figure things out. "It's too late, I'm too infected. Everyone, remember to survive. This is my last order as your sergeant." Ran wanted to say something, but he didn't want to listen anymore. The girl led young Ju back to the station. They groped in the dark and walked for quite a while. If she had accidentally found her, it would be strange. Normally, she should be near the shelter. Why would she be so far away? Not to mention, she didn't even carry a weapon. Young Ju noticed some dismembered corpses. Judging by the amount of blood, they had probably been killed when they were still human. Then, the girl opened the door to the bakery across the street and told them they could hide there. Before arriving at Suo Station, Yi and the others were spreading out to look for a car that still worked. In-ho was lucky enough to find a car key. As the 5 of them got in, Jun realized Kyung-sik was missing. It was then that the receptionist said he had left. After that, everyone started moving towards Suo Station. Kyung-sik took a drag of his cigarette, watching them leave, then turned to look at the transformed squad leader trying to crawl towards him. Memories of him flooded his mind. He had accepted him as a son, didn't let anyone bully him, shared good food with him, helped him polish his shoes and iron his uniform before his leave, and even gave him some money for his birthday meal. For everything the squad leader had done for him, Kyung-sik wanted to help him be freed. Young Ju replaced the batteries in her phone and called her mother. She was overjoyed to hear her voice, and her mother was crying, worried about her so much. Young Ju said she was in a fairly safe place with station staff and that she would go to Suo Station and head straight home tomorrow morning. The girl signaled her to be quiet. Young Ju told her mother not to worry, then hung up. She asked the girl if she wasn't going to call her family. The girl just smiled and said it didn't matter if she called or not. They had just met, and the girl introduced herself as Yoon-ki. After driving for a while, Yi-yoon's group had to stop because the road was blocked. Aaron thought he would get out here. He couldn't hold on any longer. Luckily, they were stopped in front of a Chinese restaurant, and there was still liquor in the refrigerator. He could last a little longer if he got a drink right away. Yi used his phone to call Young Ju, but he still couldn't reach her. Young Ju was ecstatic when she discovered a plate of sweet and sour pork with sauce. Perfect. It was like they were on a date. Just then, the receptionist shoved a piece of paper into his hand, with Ra's social media account written on it. He almost yelled out loud. Her nervous reaction made her embarrassed. Constantly maintaining a drunken state was exhausting for Aaron. He couldn't resist reaching for some hangover relief, but In-ho forcefully stopped him. "Brother, you have to fight." So he added red ginseng to Aaron's liquor. Yi-yoon couldn't get through to Young Ju, so he tried calling her mother. She said she had just spoken to Young Ju, and that she hadn't arrived yet. Young Ju was stuck at the express bus terminal. For some reason, she felt very uneasy. Yi heard this and told her to stay inside and wait for him to pick up Young Ju and bring her home. In-ho noticed a child outside. He was about to go check it out when Aaron patted his shoulder to reassure him. He was so worried about his wife and children at home that he almost didn't realize it had changed. Yoon-ki suggested going outside. She said that if they could just run to the machine room and turn on the power, they could raise the shutters because it had a backup power supply for emergencies. Young Ju worriedly wanted to go with her, but she said, "Do you know why pilots don't eat the same meal?" Seeing that she didn't understand, she said it would be safer if she went alone. Then, Yoon-ki armed herself with a coffee maker handle and shined the flashlight into the darkness. As everyone got into the car to leave, Yi-yoon suggested they split up. It was time for them to go home and protect their loved ones. Yi rode his motorcycle to the express bus terminal. Then he used the butt of his gun to break the shutters. In the bakery, Young Ju heard a noise outside and fearfully grabbed a box cutter for defense. Yi-yoon finally broke a hole big enough to crawl through. As he walked, he quietly called Young Ju's name. After a while, Yi-yoon came across another shutter, but it was blocked by a suitcase. Several of them tried to pass, but he kicked them aside. Yi-yoon yelled out Young Ju's name. The space was large, so his voice echoed. Young Ju, with her hand pressed against the glass door, heard him calling her name, and she excitedly called out his name. Yi immediately heard it and ran towards her. Young Ju also opened the door and ran towards the sound of his voice. On Yi's side, there were quite a few zombies. He was going to ignore them, but unfortunately, he slipped and fell. Young Ju cried as she ran to find him, and in her excitement, she mistook a zombie for him. And just as the nightmare was about to come true, Yi fired his gun. Finally, they were reunited. He took the eyeball off her neck and anxiously asked if she was okay. Yi-yoon suddenly ran into his arms. "It's okay. You're here. Don't be scared. Baby, don't be scared." Then Yi led Young Ju outside. In front of them, a group of zombies was about to make a last stand when someone suddenly opened fire. Dunn stared blankly at the 4 people in front of him. Instead of splitting up, they wanted the whole group to visit each family together. It's safest to stick together in times like these. Let me introduce you. These are my friends. Young Ju wanted to wait for Yoon Ki to return so they could leave together, but everyone had searched the entire area and couldn't find her anywhere. In-ho asked her how she'd gotten in, questioning whether that girl had left alone just to open the shutters. Young Ju confirmed that was exactly what happened. Yoon Ki had found her and brought her up. He then inquired about the corpses outside, to which she responded that they were already there when she arrived. Hearing this, In-ho immediately called Yi-yoon aside for a private conversation, then pointed to a decapitated body wearing an Yoon Ki name tag. Yi-yoon assumed she had just been attacked, but In-ho insisted that this person had been dead for at least 10 hours. Unexpectedly, Young Ju reappeared, and In-ho quickly fabricated a story about having seen a woman running away from the station earlier. She, without suspicion, readily accepted the story and hurriedly left with everyone else. Reflecting on everything that had happened, Young Ju felt like it was all a dream. She took out an autographed CD and handed it to Yi-yoon. Initially, he didn't believe her, thinking she was trying to trick him, but when she mentioned that she had met Young-jin at the train station, he immediately bragged about it to In-ho. Everyone felt a little happier listening to the two of them bickering. At that moment, the radio announced, "Suo Station is no longer a safe haven. The emergency shelter has been relocated to Incheon Port." As they were conveniently passing by the Han River, everyone got out of the vehicle to enjoy the view for a while. "Honey, we're not going to break up, are we? There's absolutely no reason for us to break up. Even if all this hadn't happened, I would never let you go. I promise to protect you with everything I have. It's me who's protecting you, actually." Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the city. Everyone quickly got back into the car and continued their journey.